July. That quiet ended at 6:15 a.m. when a Toyota Camry carrying 3 teenagers left the road at a T-intersection, struck a curb, a sign, and finally the side of a building at full acceleration. 2 young men in the back seat, Davon Flanigan and Dominic Russo, were killed instantly. The 17-year-old driver, McKenzie Shirilla, survived, pulled from beneath the dashboard by the jaws of life. For nearly 2 months, investigators treated this as what it appeared to be, a tragedy. A single-car accident, tragic and final, the kind that ends in a headstone rather than a headline. What changed their minds is worth sitting with, because it changes what you think you know about the people closest to you, too. The first person to introduce a doubt wasn't a detective. It was a grieving friend, a teenager named Tyler Croy, who couldn't shake the feeling that something didn't. Friend group used to keep tabs on one another. He pulled the data from that night and found something the police hadn't yet seen. A car accelerating to 90 miles an hour with no braking at all. He handed it over voluntarily. He didn't have to. That single act of a teenager doing an investigator's job for free is the quiet hinge this entire case turns on. What the evidence began to describe was not a girl who lost control of a car. It was a relationship in the process of losing control of itself. McKenzie and Dominic, her boyfriend, had been together for years. She was 17, living with him full-time. In a home he technically ran, but she saw many of their arguments. And what those recordings capture is not mutual conflict. It is one calm voice absorbing one escalating one. You'll hear her threaten to key his car. You'll hear her threaten to break his window. You'll hear her tell him he'll come open the door or there will be a serious problem. 2 weeks before the crash, on a Cleveland highway, she told him, while he was in the passenger seat, that she would crash the car. He believed her enough to call his mother for help getting out of the vehicle. Ask yourself, if you'd heard a friend say what Dominic said to his mother that day, what you would have told him to do next. That's not a rhetorical flourish. It's the actual dilemma this case is built on, and it has no comfortable answer. Here is where the story insists on complicating itself, because that is what actual evidence does. It refuses to simplify. In the hospital, one of the first things McKenzie said to the detective interviewing her was a question. Could they just take her license away for 10 years? Not what happened. Not is everyone okay. A bargain, offered before anyone had accused her of anything. Investigators ruled out mechanical failure. They ruled out impairment. The marijuana and psilocybin found in her system were, for toxicology, not present at levels that would explain what happened. They ruled out a medical cause. Her own hospital records showed no history of the blackout, she would later claim. What remained was the car's event data recorder, the black box, which showed 100% acceleration and 100% throttle for the entire 5 seconds before impact, with the brake never once applied. Seconds to reach that speed. Time enough, prosecutors would argue, to think better of it. She did not. And that is when things got interesting, because knowing what happened in those 5 seconds still leaves the harder question sitting untouched in the middle of the courtroom. Not what she did. Why? McKenzie was arrested 3 months later and charged as a juvenile, facing detention only until her 21st birthday, until a hearing moved her case into adult court, where the charge became murder and the maximum penalty became life. Taking the stand to introduce the recordings her son had made, was met with no cross-examination at all. Sit with that. The defense had nothing to ask her. Consider what that silence tells you about the strength of what she'd just played for the court. The judge took the weekend. 3 days of testimony, ending on a Friday, with a recess was not a pause. It was an interrogation of everything they believed about the justice system, conducted in their own living rooms at 3 a.m. What was she weighing? What had she noticed that no one else had? Whether the weight of a father's testimony, that he had received a phone call at lunchtime informing him his son, the oldest of 3 siblings adopted from foster care, would not be coming home. It was. The judge returned Monday with written notes. She read slowly, and what she read grew more damning with each sentence, until the language of accident disappeared from the room entirely. The video, she said, showed purpose, showed intent. The defendant, she said, morphed from a responsible driver into what the judge called literally being at the wheel of a weapon, choosing acceleration when nothing required it, refusing the brake when everything did. This was not reckless driving. This was murder. Self had once reduced, in oral argument, to nothing more than cargo in the back seat. Say that sentence back to yourself. Cargo. That is the word a licensed attorney chose, in open court, to describe a dead 19-year-old with no argument to answer for and no relationship to the defendant beyond friendship and terrible timing. It is worth asking yourself what kind of case requires that word to survive. The sentence handed down was 15 years to life on each count, run concurrently, meaning McKenzie Shirilla will serve, in practical terms, the same sentence she would have received had only one young man died in that car instead of two. Her victim's family sat with that arithmetic in real time, in the same room where the guilty verdict had just landed, and found it very hard to reconcile. Justice, in this case, arrived, but it arrived with a footnote that neither family asked for and isn't just a verdict. It's a method, one you can actually use the next time you find yourself sizing up a person, a relationship, or a claim someone is asking you to simply accept. Don't listen to what someone says about themselves in a crisis. Listen to what the record shows they did with the seconds they had. A phone app a teenager used for fun became the first crack in an official story. A black box no one could argue with became the last word in a case that otherwise rested on competing narratives. The lesson of Davon, Flanigan, and Dominic Russo is not a lesson about one reckless girl on one terrible morning. It is a lesson about what the evidence remembers, long after the people involved have decided what they'd prefer to forget. The court did not need to raise its voice. The 5 seconds did the talking. That is the only kind of objection that ever really wins.